Thank you all for joining us. I am so excited about this, where we're going to talk about how the search for inner happiness meets the drive for some of the toughest challenges, which the two of you have really overcome. I want to introduce our incredible panel here today. Sitting next to me is Gawdat, the author and founder of 1 Billion Happy, who for decades was in tech leadership at Google, and then turned his focus to decoding happiness through data, empathy, and purpose. He's also the co-founder of Emma.love. And right next to Mo is Omar, Samra, a adventurer and entrepreneur who has taken on Everest, skied the poles, and rowed across an ocean. It's a documentary on Netflix now called Beyond Raging Sea. Both of you understand pushing the limits.
Ways.
What's that?
In different ways.
In different ways, in very different ways. Mo, you've actually done a lot of research on happiness. Tell me what you found.
Well, happiness is very mixed up in the world. There are lots of things that are positioned as happiness when they truly are what we normally refer to as feel good, right? So there is a difference between feeling good and feeling happy. And one of the very first things I attempted to do in my work was to define happiness. And happiness is different than, climbing Everest or jumping up and down in a party. That's a good feeling. There's no denying that. But happiness in itself is more about finding that calm and peaceful contentment, if you want, to be okay with life as it is right now, for you to feel that I don't mind if this lasts forever. Like if this moment continues and lasts, that's a happy moment for me. Now, basically the easiest way to understand them is to look at the biological machine of humanity and how the biology of us works differently with every feeling, with every good feeling, right? So happiness, as I describe it, that calm and peaceful contentment, is associated with a hormone that's known as serotonin. And serotonin is a calmer. Its job is exactly the definition of happiness. It basically is secreted in your body when you scan the world around you and you say, this feels great, okay? I can sit down, I can relax, I can digest my food, I can replenish my muscles, I can reflect, I can rest, I can sleep, and so on. So serotonin is associated with happiness. Dopamine is probably the most mistaken for happiness, but it's also one of the most common feel-good hormones or feel-good triggers in our system. The dopamine is a reward hormone. You feel it when you have achieved something, or you've been rewarded something, or you've been surprised by something, or you've been given an incredibly joyful and pleasurable experience, if you want. It feels great.
Yeah.
And dopamine as a hormone is an excitatory. So it basically, it sort of tells you, I want you to keep doing what you're doing. This is good for the species, if you want, right? Then, of course, there is oxytocin, which we rarely talk about, but it's very similar to happiness. Oxytocin is very encoded within us as humans because you have to imagine that humanity could not have survived in isolation. So basically, I always joke and say Einstein would have been eaten in the jungle in 4 minutes, right? Doesn't matter how intelligent you are, the reason why humanity survives is because we build those tribes and communities and we help each other and we have each other's backs and so on. And so oxytocin is the love hormone, if you want. It's basically, you get it when you spend time with a loved one, you get it when you meet incredibly hospitable people like what we have here in Saudi. You get it when you're basically between a mother and a child, between partners and so on. And then finally, of course, there are endorphins, which are, it's surprising that they feel good, but endorphins are secreted in your body post a stressful experience, if you want.
A great workout, you love the feel of it.
It sort of calms you down after stress. And so when we talk about travel, you get all of those different experiences. You get all of those good feelings differently in each of them, Serotonin and the calm and peaceful contentment is, when you sit on a beach somewhere, or when you when you have a wonderful, relaxed time for reflection, right? And there are ways where you can design travel experiences around serotonin, right? Dopamine, of course, you get, for Omar it would probably be very different, but for me, if the people here find that this was a useful session and they say, hey, well done on stage, then I get that little jolt of like, yeah, I did it, right?
I never thought about hormones and using it to think
Yeah.
about travel. Omar, I want to ask you if you agree with Mo's assessment there on endorphins, but also I'm kind of curious, how do we get ourselves to rethink travel when you're looking at hormones as sort of a biological marker?
Actually, I really love that we brought science into it. And I think it's kind of an invitation for destinations and tour operators to try and think about this. And I'm sort of wearing both my adventure hat and also my industry hat as a sort of adventure travel hospitality entrepreneur. And I think when we're looking at it, it's endorphins, of course, for me, when we're talking about adventure, it's this type 2 fun, which is basically you're putting yourself through a lot of adversity, but you're enjoying it at the end of the day. And when we're curating and designing travel experiences, I think it behooves us to think about it scientifically. Because you look at 20 years ago, everything was about sightseeing. And then the buzzword became sight doing. And then it was about experiences. But now we're truly entering into the era of transformational travel. And I think to be able to achieve that, because at the end of the day, the true luxury isn't just staying in a 5 or 6 star hotel or getting the best chef. It's basically providing the one thing that we can't access in our day-to-day lives, which is, at the end of the day, disconnection. And so when we're talking about these types of experiences, we're looking at, like Mo mentioned, for example, when you go to the beach. When you go to the beach, you're maybe accessing 2 of the 3 or 3 of the 4 hormones he's talking about. But if you're designing an experience where, for example, you're going on a hike in nature, you are, obviously you're connected with nature and maybe you're connected with amazing people around you, but you're also getting that sense of disconnection. You're exerting yourself in a way that's engaging your endorphins, but it's not making you feel unsafe. And then here, when you activate all of those 4 hormones together, I think it's this cocktail that creates a feeling when it's earned happiness and it's not instant gratification. And then I think that's when you create a sense of fulfillment. And so we're talking about tourism and we're talking about return on investment, if you are actually solving for this, what you end up getting is a client that is extremely happy, that is going to talk about it with their friends, and is potentially more likely to come back. And at the end of the day, that's what we're all looking for.
So you guys, I have to tell you, I am nothing personal, but I don't want to climb Mount Everest.
Neither do I, again.
I don't have it. In fact, we were in Qadiyah the first night, and 2 friends said, go ride the roller coasters. And I said, when I was 10, 12, I loved riding roller coasters. But I don't know if it's after becoming a mom, something switches off in the brain, and I go nowhere near adventure seeking and thrill seeking. But Mo, do you have to always be chasing these thrill and adventure to reach this point? Because I want to get to where you're talking about, but I don't want to do the crazy wild things.
Not at all. I have to say, when you were saying it, I had to question myself, do I not want to climb Everest, or do I tell myself that because I can't? But at least Omar tells me about what it's like up there, so that's fine. I have to say, I mean, my favorite travel experience of the year is the exact opposite. So one of the interesting things is that, because marketing something flashy is what advertisement is all about, a lot of the time a travel experience is marketed as that fun party on the beach or that adventure and so on. My favorite travel experience of the year is most of the people that know me know I do a 40 days silent retreat every year. I don't go
40 days, 40?
40 days.
You don't talk to anybody?
No, yeah.
I could never imagine.
Happily, oh my God, I mean, like, this is it really. This is where most of my inspiration happens. I don't go to a monastery, by the way, because if a monk wakes me up at 4 a.m. in the morning to meditate, I'll punch him. And, that defies the purpose if you think about it. But I find a place in nature where the absolute travel feature that's offered to me is disconnection, which, Omar was talking about. This is very interesting because then you manage to connect with other parts of you, other parts of the world that we live in, that are so much more joyful than the distraction of constant activity and constant engagement. I know that you probably do some of that too, but it's the idea of a completely different travel experience that has very little in it instead of a lot.
What do you think? I mean, Omar, you are living always on the edge of adventure.
Well, I mean, I'm getting on a bit as well with age. So
I find that hard to believe.
Things have to shift. Well, the interesting thing is that I look at it, there are two like archetypes, in life, like at least for me, and I think it's relevant for a lot of people. It's like the warrior archetype where you're walking through life and you're seeing life is essentially like an infinite number of dragons that you have to slay. These dragons are basically life's challenges, things that come in your way. And then at some point in your life, you realize you're playing a finite game in an infinite universe because there's no end to these dragons. You slay one, you have a feeling that you've overcome something, but then there's a bigger dragon waiting around the corner. And so eventually at a certain point in life, you're able to get your foot off the pedal and you embrace what I call the artist archetype, which is now you're playing an infinite game in an infinite universe, and it's essentially just about being. And so this is when you truly surrender. And so travel, some experiences like Mo just described with the silent retreat can truly embody that. So actually moving away from the hormones, and I wonder, because last year I embarked on a similar experience, but I kind of questioned, what if I removed everything? Okay. And so I spent a week in a dark cave, it's a darkness retreat. I don't know if the word retreat is so, so relevant here, but it was by myself, alone, in complete darkness, with no source of light, so you couldn't even see your own hand. And they just twice a day they put food and raw food, and you eat and so on. And I don't know, maybe Mo can tell us what kind of hormones would be firing there.
Exactly.
But it was the most profound, most serene.
Why? It sounds absolutely dreadful.
It's what I thought as well, and I think when I went into it, I had my challenge hat on. This is something that I need to overcome. And then after a few hours in there, I was like, what am I doing? This is the antithesis of why I'm here. Yeah. And the idea is to truly surrender and just to be with what is. And it actually happened that after a very rough time in my life personally, and so I was grappling with a lot of stuff. And so I was actually scared to walk in, but after a few hours, after embracing the idea that it's nothing to fight, I just need to be present and really truly feel what's happening inside of my body, it was just a beautiful experience. And then the moment of stepping out of that a week later, the first time I saw the sun, and that feeling of rebirth, and almost feeling everything like you're feeling it for the first time, the air brushing against your face, or just the sounds of birds or whatever. And then when you came back home, connecting with everyone, everything had a different flavor. So it's almost like we overload our system and our nervous system so much that at some point we need something that's very different to reset us. It doesn't have to be as extreme as a darkness or a silent retreat. However, it's also something we can think about when we're designing experiences, because a lot of times in travel, we tend to pack so many things in a very short itinerary, and we just want to present the client with as much as possible. However, sometimes we need to think about creating space, and that space in these programs can actually be the thing that really defines it.
Yeah, I mean, you have to imagine that this is not what we were made for at all, right? This life of constant stimulation is a very capitalist approach to living. It's basically people constantly trying to sell you things, and so if a tour organizer sends you an itinerary that has 20 things in it, they can price every one of those 20 in a way that allows them to make a little more revenue. But in that way, you're taxing the experience itself, because one of my favorite moments in my entire life is I went into the 14th chapel. Was it 14th or 16th? I don't remember. The Michelangelo thing in the Vatican. But I went with someone who was very well connected in Italy, right? And so we went in at 5 to 5, and it actually shuts down at 5. Okay, so they kicked everyone else, and then they just kept the 4 of us in there and switched on the light, right? And I could tell you, I could spend forever in that moment because suddenly the detail that you see is very different. The whole place calms down. You don't hear the noise of tourists and so on. And in an interesting way, you could price that one experience at 200 times or 20 times the I'll just go take you to see it, right? Yeah. And I think that's what's missing in our life, that constant stress and constant stimulation. In our makeup as humans, we were actually made for silence. We were made for darkness before electricity was there. We had a sufficient number of hours of darkness. And now that we don't have any of that, unfortunately, it's a pendulum swing for those of us who are searching for themselves, for that deep connection. You have to swing the pendulum all the way back to get sort of a bit of a balance, if you want.
Mo, it's interesting because you've had an incredible career at Google. You've been deep enmeshed in tech. When does tech hinder us when it comes to travel, and how do we unleash ourselves? This is the struggle that I deal with hour to hour.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about that. It's so I apologize for some of the things I built. I have to say it's always the intention of a tech creator to create a better experience for people, and you have to admit, tech made the world better in so many ways. But it also took away from the world in so many ways, and you know, and there is nothing to blame tech for, because tech is a force with no polarity, right? So you can apply it to good, and it would create an incredible value in your life, or you can apply it to you know, distraction and pain and so on, and it would really make your life miserable. And I think that the line between them truly is a choice by us, not by the tech provider. You have to become very aware, right? And of course, if you think of travel, for example, and how tech can enable some incredible experiences. You know, my current startup is an AI startup, and my co-founder is a total geek. So he doesn't do anything himself anymore. He just has agents, AI agents doing things for him, including planning his travel, right? In the past, you would have to go to Google and ask what it is that Google wants to build. And that's, you know, so sorry, what it is that you want to go, and Google will give you some information. Now you can go to an AI agent and say, build the entire itinerary for me. We developed an incredible white paper, if you guys haven't seen it here, for TOURISE, around that, right? And those experiences, surely by tech removing the burden of the organization, it makes the experience better, right? The question is, then you get there, and instead of actually, you know, holding the hand of someone you love, or sitting in silence, admiring the nature or whatever, or connecting with the people, the local people, you look through your phone, you don't even see the place. Your phone sees the place, and you still see your phone. And that's truly when tech takes away from you. There's always that line, the balance in the middle, which I think is really where you've used tech to serve you, and tech hasn't used you to serve the objectives of the tech providers.
Omar, I am constantly, the older I get, my family is from India, and the older I get, the more I just want to be in nature in a way that when I was younger, I really didn't care about it. How do you use tech in how you travel, and how do you manage to connect with nature in a world that's just full of tech everywhere you look?
I think when it comes to my own journeys, like for example, all the expeditions that you talked about, whether it's, you know, climbing Everest or skiing to the poles and these types of things, I think it's there's some tech involved, and I think it's no different from designing a client trip as well. It's, you know, tech is there to get you to the starting point, whether Mo talked about it's getting the information that you need to curate the experience and so on. It's there maybe to keep you safe if there's elements of tech that's going to take you to handle the experience more safely. But absolutely, I'm really against tech being part of the immersion of the experience, whether it's VR or AR. It's, I think it really detracts, especially in a world where, like we said, we've become so disconnected. And at the end of the day, what are we trying to do? We're trying to make the end consumer happy. And, you know, businesses are trying to make ROI. So at the end of the day, it has to be centric on the experience, which we said needs to be transformative. So if you want to create a transformative experience, the person has to be fully present when they're there. There shouldn't be anything between the person and the individual and the experience itself. And so what I invite people to think about is to think that there is nothing new that needs to be invented. So when we look at nature, And there's a science called biophilic design, so it's the love of nature. So there's actually a science behind how to build things, whether it's a camp or a lodge or an experience that is centered around to create the feelings that we need to feel to have a good experience. So the clues and all the answers are already in nature. It's a form of, let's say, ancient technology. And we also need to look at indigenous people. I think one of the most memorable experiences in my life, I don't know if people will believe me, but I started my career as an investment banker and a private equity professional. And then 8 years into it, I kind of saw the light and I decided to do something different. But I had the question of quitting for so long, but it was one defining experience that I did that was the kicker for me. And it was when I went to climb one of the 7 summits, which is Karsten's Pyramid, and it's in Papua New Guinea. And there you're walking for about a week in very dense jungle with remote tribes from that region. And we were wearing all our gear, very light professional gear, and walking through this, getting stuck in the mud and so on. And the people are essentially just wearing penis gourds and completely bare skin, and they're just moving so swiftly through nature. And the way their body has evolved is so in unison and so in sync with the natural environment. And so that is, for me, it's a form of high technology, which when you are completely in harmony with the natural surroundings and the environment around you. And so when you're designing a travel experience, what you're trying to give that person, again, the highest form of luxury is to present them with an experience where they can experience that, to be truly enmeshed and connected to nature, and to be as close as possible as the first men, let's say, the people who walked the earth a long time ago when they were truly connected with nature. How can we today get a glimpse of that will move us, and then we go back to our hectic kind of busy lives and take some of that into it and learn something from it and pass it on.
Yeah. Can I just add quickly
Please.
that it matters for those in the travel industry to understand that while Omar is absolutely right, sometimes less tech is better, it seems to me that more tech is coming, and it's coming to replace the travel experience. If you think about what movies were for so long, movies were a bit of sightseeing, if you want. It's an invitation to live a couple of hours in a world that you've never been into, but you couldn't interact with it, right? With VR now, what is about to happen is that you can create experiences that really sometimes, are better than the real thing. And I think that's really an interesting dichotomy, because of course with a proper overlay of technology on top of an experience, using a glass or something, a pair of Google glasses, you can actually improve the nature's experience a little bit, or the real experience a little bit. But what is also about to happen is that we're going to replace those experiences altogether. Not only can I travel to New York, but I can travel to New York in the 1920s and slap the Great Gatsby a couple of times. And that's a very unusual travel experience, and there will be quite a few of them. And so for travel professionals, you have to start differentiating yourself in very interesting ways. And I think Omar is spot on that, everything artificial wears out after a while. And I think that the real trick is how do you use enough technology so that you improve the real thing, right? It's about using enough technology to text my wonderful daughter and say, hey baby, I miss you, do you want to go out for dinner? Dinner is the experience, right? If we texted a little more than that, then tech becomes an adverse component in our life.
I want to ask you, I think all of us want to feel in our lives every day like we're on some sort of vacation. The high that we feel, the comfort, the joy, sometimes even of just planning a vacation, you have this great feeling looking forward to it. But Omar, how do we find that same feeling bottled up in everyday life? Can we do that?
I think it's possible, but I don't know if in my experience it's not possible without radical decisions and changes in your life. Like for me, I can just reflect on my own experience. I'm somebody who, grew up and lived in cities, all my life, Cairo, Dubai, London, Hong Kong. And it was only about 2-3 years ago when I made what the time for me was seemed like a very radical decision, is to leave the city and move. And I lived in Cairo last, and it was about 20 million people. and then moved to a town of about 2,000 people by the Red Sea in a place called Soma Bay in Egypt. And that seemed like the scariest thing in the world, but it was an intentional decision of slowing my life right down. It was, being more present with my daughter, but also as a place where it has a lot of nature around. I used to live in the very busy city with the hustle and bustle, and my nervous system was constantly taxed. And then I would take a holiday to go and relax myself to come back into that. Now it's the other way around. I have my center, the place that I feel very comfortable in, and I'm more than happy to travel to, stress myself out or to do things and get excited and so on, and then come back to that. So I think it.
Do you have a guest room, Omar? I'm moving in. It sounds amazing.
I have several, so anytime. Yeah.
It is, however, it's entirely up to which hormones you prioritize. Remember that. So when we started the entire suite of feel-good hormones, the one that can be marketed heavily is dopamine. It's experiences that are short jolts of joy, okay, or pleasure, if you want. If you prioritize your serotonin, then you, by definition, you want a calmer place where things don't change that much. If you prioritize oxytocin, then you want to be with friends or with people that you love, even if it's a travel destination or at home, but you're prioritizing different things. I think the big battle in the modern world is a choice that you do in your head that's related to all of the amount of distraction that's bombarding you around what kinds of experiences you should have, versus an actual visit to your real self inside and asking yourself, what kinds of experiences do I actually genuinely crave, okay? And I would say that, like Omar so accurately said, those dopamine experiences should be the exception to the rule. They should be, you should always have a life that's fulfilling and contented and joyful, and then you get that awe, that moment of awe by traveling to a destination that gives you a different experience. But it shouldn't be constant stimulation. Your physical form is not designed for that.
Maybe that's my takeaway, is you've got to not have so much stimuli around yourself with technology and find ways every day in your life to remove yourself. Omar, I've never looked at hormones this way. I think you need to talk to Apple to have it on the watch so I can look and realize my serotonin is...
What do you think Apple wants with those things? They want you to, unfortunately, marketing in general wants you to be stimulated all the time.
Yes, it does.
So, yeah.
It does. Well, I want to thank you both, Omar and Mo, for giving us a perspective on finding happiness in the midst of exploration and teaching us you don't always have to climb a mountain to find it.
Thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure.
Thank you.